Hello and welcome to Tea and Medals. Today, Jerry and I are joined by Tom Long. Tom leads an organisation called Tarka London, which provides developmental exercise for children of preschool age. With nearly a quarter of 5-year-olds overweight or obese in the UK, this has never been a more important time to have this conversation. We discuss leadership, building confidence, teamwork, logic and problem solving, the importance of providing positive role models in a preschool setting, learning through physical activity, and taking risk and a healthy attitude to failure. Enjoy the podcast.
Oh, good times. Yeah. Tom, where do we find you today? Where are you located?
Much like a large part of the proportion of the population, I'm working from home today. We're very lucky in the fact that we can mix working from home and being in the office quite easily. The fact that Tark is a human business, we kind of look after children. We have to physically be there to do that. And much like being in the army, there's so many moving parts. Like if we think we've got probably, 30 privates going out this week, that's 30 different patrols or anything else. We need to have kind of an operations center where people can look each other in the eye and coordinate all that there. So, we are in the office as well. So it's quite nice. We've got a good mix at the moment.
And very good. Today, Tom, are they? The school's open and kids are there?
Yeah, I mean, all schools are open, all nurseries are open. We're running all our classes. We're running pretty much a full program. We're very much like a kind of Kevin Costner in the Field of Dreams. We kind of went, if we build it, they will come. So we published a kind of a full program of classes, giving all our kind of parents the option to turn up and, bring their kids to do it. Some classes are filled up, some haven't. And we'll, after half term, we'll reevaluate the ones that haven't filled up and we'll kind of adjust the program there. But we wanted to give people as much of an opportunity to turn up and take part in it if they want to do it. And we were kind of generally surprised that, there are a lot of people out there who after lockdown, they've, like me, a dad of two, we've kind of had enough of our kids. And you realize the impact that it's had on them. They need to be socializing with other kids. They need to be going to school. They need to be exercising. And, we want to help provide that service so they can do that.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people now have come to realize that this is something we're going to have to live with for the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, right? And we have to get back to whatever normal is. And as long as we are safe about it and the institutions that we go to take it seriously, and we are careful in as much as we can be, we have to get back to normal.
Yeah. And there's so many different bits that make up normal and what the new normal is going to be and everything else. But I think we kind of get taken back by how resilient kids are and how well they adapted to it, especially young kids. Mine are the same age as Reese's, kind of 4 and 5. And we were amazed that, they kind of just slipped out of their normal routine, which was going to school, seeing their friends, to just being with their family unit and being educated at home and doing all that stuff. And we were like, oh, wow, this is kind of, amazing how resilient they are. And they picked up all the lexicon of virus and masks and COVID, and it all kind of trips off their tongue. And you think, they can do it and they're very adaptable. But we don't realize the long-term damage that that's going to have on them. We've still got some families who haven't returned to us and they've asked us about doing privates at their house, but it's kind of, they haven't socialized since February. And that's a huge impact on a kid. And, just the talking about it, us having conversations with other parents in the background, it's creating a kind of stigma and something else that's there. And we need to kind of, as much as possible, break down all those kind of barriers that we don't think they're picking up on, which they're going to actually set for life. And we need to, if we can, encourage them to play with friends, go to school, whatever you're kind of comfortable with. But we need to push them as fast as we can, because, as we know, where they're resilient, they can fall back one way, but we need to kind of constantly push our kids and make sure that they are comfortable and they are pushing their own barriers going forward.
Tom, it sounds to me like what you set up with Tarka is somewhere, if I was that age, I'd love to come. If I was a parent with kids that age, I'd love them to be going to see you and your team on a daily basis. Can you tell us and our listeners, what is Tarka? What makes it different, and why did you set it up?
So Tarka is developmental exercise, which kind of sounds a bit kind of cheesy and everything else, but it's about getting them a healthy attitude to exercise, having fun, and also developing them, making them well-rounded children so that they can take that through life so that they can start the journey now of being healthy, being active, having fun with their friends, and they'll then take that attitude to exercise and health all the way up through. And you said kind of, why did we start it? I didn't actually start it. As another kind of good friend of mine and Reese's from the army, a guy called Rufus, who left the army, kind of went into property, did a few other things, and realized it just wasn't actually making him happy. And what made him happy was kind of making other people happy and bringing that joy of exercise to children. Because, you know, I think you mentioned it the other day, Jerry, there was that kind of Peloton moment where you buy something and you're going to go, God, why didn't I think of this? It's like, it was the same with Tarka. I know Rufus really well. I took my kids to one of the classes there, and I looked at it and thought, why hasn't anyone done this before? It's kind of captured the market, which is young kids, kind of preschool, nursery, and they're so under kind of provided for in terms of physical exercise, fun things to do. Like, we can do whatever activities we want at the weekend. You know, we all traipse around different, you know, little gym or the zoo or anything, trying to entertain and kind of tire our children out. What they really need is something bespoke just for them. So kind of Rufus really captured that in terms of making it about exercise, making it fun, making it upbeat, and having kind of positive role models for the kids to kind of identify with and enjoy. So when I say developmental exercise, it's kind of, they come in, kids don't do what we would do in an exercise class. They won't do 10 burpees, they won't do press-ups. So you've got to make it fun and interesting for them. So we develop it in terms of a theme and a role play and a game. So one week they'll be going off to Mars. So they've got to build a spaceship. So they've got to run around, collect different tubes that they have to connect together. They've got to get some rocket fuel, which are balls, and they've got to throw them around. And all the time they've got to dodge aliens. They will do that for an hour, running around, climbing over things, jumping things, and not even realize they're exercising. But the kind of the developmental bit that comes in on top of the exercise is the fact that we try and put in everything that we've learned from the army. So within that, there's some kind of confidence building, there's teamwork, there's leadership, there's communication, there's logic and problem solving. And we try and put all those subtly into the game so that they don't even realize they're doing it. So hopefully they turn up, they get exercised, they're becoming more or better, more rounded individuals. And they're also having fun, making friends, and, you know, kind of burning a lot of energy. And then we give them back at the end of the class after having done 5-10 minutes of stretching and kind of breathing and exercises. So they should hopefully be tired, happy, and calm when we kind of deliver them back to their parents. And that's the kind of theory behind Tarka.
And that's why you are so popular, because that is every parent's dream, having a tired, happy, and calm child at the end of the day.
And they should go home after the class kind of raving about Tarka, which means they're going to come again, but they should also be hungry. They're going to eat well, and they're going to be tired, so they're going to sleep well, and then they're going to wake up the next morning kind of ready to go again. But unfortunately, kids, as we know, are a bit like Labradors. The more you run them around, the fitter they get, and then the more exercise they need. So they kind of, it's a never-ending cycle with kids.
I imagine something very positive about the fact that they're using their brains while they're being physically challenged as well, because I think, I don't want to generalize, but I would say that's a criticism that people of my generation have of young people at the moment. They sit around getting stimulated by video or by whatever means, and so there must be something more in the fact that they're using brain power whilst they're physically active.
Exactly, and kind of screens and screen time is, you know, we read about it all the time. It's, you know, kind of going to kill off this generation, do everything else. You know, kind of they will only hold a screen as long as you let them hold a screen. And it's kind of beholden on us as the parents or, you know, nannies or whoever else to have an alternative to do that. We're one alternative. And like I say, we want to set that foundation that sets them up for life, that they know that there is something different to the screen. You know, it's going to be more fun running around and playing with friends than it is going to be online kind of, you know, gaming with someone else. And if we can remove them, take them away from that screen for a bit, show them that that fun is there, and it's just another opportunity that they've got. It's another option that they've got that hopefully they'll carry that on. And, you know, kind of, I was very lucky in the fact I didn't really grow up with computers. So I was always out playing sport. And then you realize that actually sport and organized activity is fun because that's where you have all the social interactions. And that's what we kind of really missing in society now, like especially with lockdown and, you know, we're doing everything now kind of on screen. Our kids are watching us. If they're not watching us looking at our phone all the time, they're watching us at work on calls doing stuff as well. So we've got to work that much harder to kind of let them know it's just a fun option to run around with their friends.
Tom, I want to rewind a couple of years to when before you joined Tarka, you were in investment banking. Is that right? What was the push away from a career in finance towards this idea of Tarka? You mentioned clearly it was a really unique business opportunity, but what for you personally pushed you into it?
I think personally, kind of balance and lifestyle. We were very lucky in the army in the fact, there was definitely a good mix of work and play. I think when I went into banking, like so many other people do, leaving the army, you kind of think it's going to be the answer, and it was in many ways. It was fast paced. It was tied to geopolitics. It was kind of all to do with current affairs, and it was very interesting. But at the same time, there wasn't that human aspect to it. If you boiled it down to the very core, it's about money, and it's about making money for yourself, and your company, and doing everything else. I think there's the bit that had been set up, going through the army about selfless commitment, everything else, all the kind of human interactions, how people work. For me, it definitely didn't tick that box. I wanted to be in a company that I could have a say in how things were run, but ultimately I wanted the core business to be something good. And Tarka, the core business, is making kids happy, and it's giving them, a healthy attitude to exercise for the rest of their life. And, we've been going for a few years now, so we've been very lucky, and we can see kids who started 2, 3, 4 years ago who've kind of gone through the system with us, and they are definitely kind of more rounded individuals, and they're nice kids to be around. And it's nice knowing that we've kind of had an impact on that. I often say it's a lot like teaching without having to actually do everything else beyond teaching. Like, we run the classes and we do all the fun stuff, and obviously there's a huge bit that we do in the office behind to kind of support that, but we don't have to kind of worry about reports or kind of paperwork or as much as that, so we can really concentrate on the fun bit for the kids.
Do you find, therefore, Tom, that as kids are running around, that they're learning from each other? You say that it's almost like teaching without having to teach. I think that's what I interpreted what you said. Are they, because they're so active, they're learning from each other all the time? Is that right?
Yeah. So there's two bits. One, there's obviously, it's a group class, so they pick up on each other's, and there's different ability levels within that class. So that you have some kids who are slightly more advanced, and the kids will see that and go, right, I'm going to follow him, and I'm off. And there are some other kids who, are less advanced, and, they'll kind of shy away initially and do other things. But again, like I say, it's like you have to give the kids the opportunity to do it. You have to put them in that environment to see it. So even the shy kids, it'll take 2, 3 classes for them to see all the other kids running around, having fun, jumping over something, that they'll then start learning, and they'll then start doing it. The second bit to it is having kind of positive role models. So we kind of work really hard at Tarka to find the right people. And, one of the reasons in our business model we haven't expanded any further than we have is because we really concentrate on having the right people in the classes. And the right people for us are, kind of young, fit, healthy, clean-cut people who are polite. They're kind of much, I'm going to say disciplinarians here, but very lightly, in terms of, because we're an ex-army company, people think we're going to run around shouting at kids and screaming at them, and, we're being treated them, like we're sergeant majors. It's not that at all. We're very nurturing, we're very caring. We work very hard to kind of build kids' confidence and bring them out. But at the same time, we say no. And if kids are messing around or they're not listening, then, we're disciplinarians as well. We're a voice, we're a strong voice and a figure of authority that the kids learn to respect, but they also know that we were there to facilitate them having fun as well. And, kind of, like I say, if they see the instructor having fun, being energetic, running around, and putting all that energy into the kids, then of course they follow. And, kids are great mimics. And as soon as they see someone else do it, they're off.
Couldn't agree more. They just copy the whole time, and that is how they learn. And it's almost by osmosis. And if you're not careful, they'll pick up bad habits as well as the good ones.
Yeah.
What, as someone who's seen, I've got 3 kids. They've either gone through preschool or are of preschool age. Outside of Tarka, and I've been to a couple of Tarka classes with my son, all of the preschool teachers have been female, and that's the teachers and the support staff as well. but I was pleasantly surprised when there was a good mix of guys and girls in the Tarka class. Why is that so unusual, do you think, in preschool education? And what is it that you've done differently that you think stands you out?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is kind of predominantly women in preschool education, and while Tarka is we are predominantly men, but we do have a large proportion of female instructors as well. I think it's important to have both. I think nursery schools are probably too far the way of just having women. There needs to be some male representation in there. But the reason there's no real male representation in preschool education is the fact that, you know, they don't pay that well. The culture in any nursery it's pretty abysmal. Let's kind of face facts. If you kind of looked at it in terms of the sense of a business, you know, would you go and work for that business of working in a nursery, which is essentially kind of, you know, childcare, looking after the kids. It's all day, you know, it demands a lot of your time and you don't get many pluses out of it. We've gone the other way and we've tried to build a culture that is actually attractive to people. So like I said, we work really hard on the people we get in. So how do we get those good people in? We make it attractive. Part of that is pay, but as I mentioned with banking before, kind of money isn't everything. You want them to feel valued. You want them to share your values as a company of what we want to do. And we're very lucky that, you know, a lot of them enjoy that aspect of working with kids and want to get the most out of them. But a lot of them just want to work in a kind of a company which is vibrant, is fun, they feel valued in, and, you know, we can talk about different generations and kind of other things like that. The big misconception about generation, I can't remember, whatever it is, generation, the latest one, not with X, I think Z or whatever it is, you know, everyone feels that they're disconnected. They don't actually, they want to feel valued. They want to feel as though they're contributing to the company. So we really try and foster that. We bring them in, we give them a say, we give them a voice. We value their ideas. And like I say, we make it fun for them to come to work. So rather than it being, you know, a trudge of turning up at 8 in the morning and leaving at 6 and, you know, kind of wiping noses all day and, you know, sticking bits of pasta onto a bit of paper, we make it fun for them. So we remove as much of the paperwork, as much of the kind of the admin away from them so that they can just concentrate on, much like a kind of an actor would, or as a professional sportsman, they turn up and they know they've got a 1 hour class and they've got to smash it out of the park. And smashing out of the park means putting as much energy as possible into that group of kids so that they have a fun class. And then they can, after that hour, they can walk away and go, you know, I've achieved something.
And when you explain it like that, of course, it makes sense that you'd have a diverse mix of instructors. I know, for example, if you look at the continent, if you look at Scandinavia, you know, there are far more men involved in primary school education and nursery school education over there. And I think it has lots of qualities, not just having men in there, but having a diverse range of teachers who have daily contact with children. One of those is that they seem to be more comfortable with a broad range of adults. They're a much broader range of adults. They don't sort of put people into boxes of female, therefore caring, male, therefore action. And of course, therefore, it makes sense to have that spread at the very earliest years. But one of the things I think it also develops, Tom, is the ability for your people to develop risk taking in children at a very early age. And I know that's one of the things you like to emphasize about Tarka. Just explain to us your approach to that.
So again, kind of risk is one of those things on a spectrum, and you only want your kids to take a certain amount of risk. And I think, you know, it's been further highlighted with COVID and everything. We've become more kind of helicopter parents. We kind of hover around our kids, make sure they're, you know, 2 meters away from people and everything else, whatever. And that the spectrum of risk that you're willing to kind of expose your children to has probably had a bit of a reset. Whereas actually what we want to do is, if you want to make a well-rounded child, then you've got to expose them to a certain element of risk. You've got to let them know that they can go off and try things. They can experiment, and sometimes they're going to fail, or sometimes they're going to get hurt. But the only way they're really going to learn is by going through that process. And, you know, us as parents telling them that they can't do something all the time isn't actually helping them develop. So, you know, within Tarka classes, yeah, there's some element of risk where they'll we'll push their boundaries. So whether that is going to be for one child, it's going to be standing up and saying something in front of a group because they're not confident, or for another child, it's going to be jumping off something, or running around or rolling and doing things. We constantly try and push the children to take risks and to know that it's okay to try and to fail as well, because I think the failure aspect is just as important about the risk bit as well. You've got to let them take a risk, knowing that sometimes they are going to fail. Otherwise, they're never going to learn how to fail. They're never going to learn how to change, adapt, and improve themselves. So I think the two kind of definitely go hand in hand.
I think it's exactly the same in business, and Jerry and I have talked to many leaders in business about this, about creating the environment where people feel comfortable to try new things and to innovate and not be afraid to fail, where they do feel they have that psychological safety and they're not going to be judged for getting things wrong, for being for interrupting a process with a novel idea. How and you can give some tactical tips on this, Tom, if you like. How do you shape that environment so kids do feel comfortable to take a risk and perhaps to fail?
Yeah, I mean, I think as parents, we've probably all been there, or we've seen kids, and you kind of go, right, kind of first one to go and touch the tree wins. And out of a group of 3 or 4 kids, one will race off, he's clearly going to win, and the other 2 may kind of trundle along. And then there's always that 3rd or 4th kid who takes 2 steps, realizes that they're not going to win, and then kind of throws themselves on the floor and starts having a bit of a tantrum about it. That is kind of a bit of an overview of life. There's always people who are out there, they're incredibly confident, they're just going to go for it, they're going to smash it, do everything else. There's the middle ground who are going to kind of follow the person who's out in the front, and they're going to do it and they're going to go along. And then there's always that element of people who are just going to give up and kind of not try. They're the people who we're kind of we spend most of our time engaging with, because they're the people who actually need most of our attention. And the reason they don't finish the race and do it, because is exactly the point I'm talking about. They don't want to fail. They don't want to be seen to be failing in front of their friends. Even and we see it young kids, kind of 2 or 3. They're aware of their surroundings. They're aware of other people judging them and viewing them. They don't want to be seen to failing. The only way you can get around that is by repetition and encouragement. So it's the simpler things, like at Tarka, we trying to learn everyone's name. So if it's that kid who's at the back when we're doing an exercise or a game, know their name, encourage them, give them positive feedback, give them high fives. And you know what? They might not do it the first time, they may not do it the second time, but the 3rd or 4th time, they'll join in. And even though they're not going to win, they'll realize that they're taking part is the fun bit. No one really cares who wins. We'll, in a Tarka class, maybe we'll do 20, 30 different little kind of mini games or races and everything else. We don't keep track of who wins and who doesn't. It's all about everyone having a go and having fun and doing that. And as long as they see everyone else doing that, they realize it's actually the taking part, which is the fun bit. And then, at the end of the race, everyone has a high five and they have a chat and they go again, and then we go again. But the only tactics I think I would give for that is you've got to give positive reinforcement for trying, and kind of, as a kind of a form of a competitive sportsman, this kind of whole kind of everyone gets a medal thing I don't really agree with. But you've got to encourage everyone for trying and participating, and then give them positive feedback, and they will just keep doing it. And you've got to keep pushing them along.
So you're not an advocate of completely removing the competitive element then? That still remains.
Yeah, that still remains. But you've got to work harder for the kids that don't automatically see those rewards. Like the competitive bit needs to remain, because kids, or we are all competitive, and it does start with kids, and we see it kind of around about 3.5. They want to win things, so you keep that there, but you don't put all and everything on it. So kind of you do little and often. So we'll have 30 games, of which 20 people will win something, and everyone else who doesn't win something is encouraged and is praised for at least kind of taking part and having a go.
It's really interesting to hear you say that, and it's refreshing, I think, to hear it that it's applied in the environment that you're in, Tom, because I think the other aspect when we talk about psychological safety is we also talk about accountability, and it's okay to be accountable for success or for failure, because that's how you develop a learning environment. And what I'm hearing from you today is really really useful actually to take to, as Reece said, businesses who are suffering the same problems, whereby people are afraid to make decisions if they don't have to. So I think, how do you see that sort of accountability being developed in children of such a young age? Do you feel that they start to own their success and perhaps learn from their failure at the same time?
Again, it's kind of, I think that probably comes slightly later in the kids. Kind of their self-awareness for that only really probably starts around kind of 5, 6, and knowing that there are kind of direct repercussions for their actions, whether that's good or bad. But that's probably because as parents, we only start becoming quite strict and hard on our kids at that age. You know, when they're younger, we don't make our own kids accountable because they are kids, and you know, we want to have that kind of environment where they can try and do other things. It's only later that we start forming that kind of structure around them that probably, you know, we then live the rest of our lives kind of going on by. And it was interesting kind of listening to General Paul when he had him on the other week, talking about, you know, the kind of the Sandhurst and the Leadership Academy. You go there and everything that's taught and everything else. I personally think that I was, you know, an okay to average officer at Sandhurst because I'd learned a lot of those leadership lessons on the sports fields playing rugby. And I picked up a lot of my leadership style doing that. Actually, it probably came before then, and before you're even aware of it, from the teachers or parents that you had before then who were kind of setting that structure before. And this is why we think it's so important that the kids at the very young age, you know, 2, 3, 4, to start putting in those kind of soft leadership lessons that, you know, we kind of are formalized at Sandhurst. But if we can work on teamwork, communication, leadership, confidence, all that stuff at their very, very young age, and they don't even realize they're doing it, it's a character trait that they're going to pick up and they're going to develop over the years. So as you say, kind of how do you define that as accountability and how they're doing everywhere else? You've got to give them all the tools that make up accountability. You can't just go here, right, be a 6-year-old, be accountable for your actions. That is a huge kind of character trait, which is made up by lots of other different character aspects as well. So you've got to kind of give the kids all the tools to be able to be accountable.
Tom, when you're interacting with the parents, either at drop off or pick up or perhaps at more formal times when you give feedback, how do you structure those interactions? And then perhaps can you think to some of the more memorable feedback that you've had from parents about their child's time at Tarka?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, we're in the service industry. We offer a service, and kind of customer service is then obviously paramount to us as well. So kind of our parents, you know, the kids are ultimately our clients because they come and do the class, but it's the parents that pay for it. So the parents need to understand what the kids are doing in the class, and you know what we've been doing with them for the hour, because we kick the parents out unless it's a younger class. We kick the parents out, and it's kind of just us with the kids. So we need to kind of
really. Do any ask to stay?
Some do initially, for the first couple of sessions, just to make sure that the kind of kids are happy and comfortable and everything else.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we kind of want the kids full attention, and if the parents are there, then you don't get the kids full attention. So we kick the parents out. We do that. So the parents obviously they want to know. We can't speak to every parent, so we're kind of working on how we message what we're doing, whether that's through social media or kind of newsletters and everything else. But yeah, there's that point at pick up and drop off where, you know, at drop off where they're throwing them in, and you know it's quite daunting for, you know, a parent to leave your child, which is your kind of most precious possession, with, you know, kind of 3 men and, you know, kind of a woman as an instructor, and you know we've got loud music and there's other kids running around, and you kind of think, oh, is this safe? So the big most important thing for us is letting the parents know that we care about their child. We're nurturing, you know, kind of child safety is our number one kind of principle, and you know we're there for the best interest of their child. Then obviously at the end of it, hopefully the kid's running out, you know, kind of happy and, you know, sweating and had a great time, and that's the time to then kind of give the parents the feedback on how they've done on. And you know, some parents want more level of feedback than others. You know, some are just happy to see their children happy, and you know that's achieved the aim for them. Other parents, you know, kind of have a higher need of information, and we kind of give that But again, we've got to realize that we're not the answer to everything in one session. And what's really rewarding for us at Tarka is we see a progression with children over a term or over a year, and we just subtly give that kind of feedback of how they're getting on.
Tom, I think you know, as I've said a couple of times, you're making great foundations to developmental learning, you know, at a very early age here. If I can be slightly controversial with you and say, if you were to give first question, sorry, why is this not being provided to every child in the state system? And secondly, if you were to give some advice to government education boards on how to reform education, what would that be?
The first one's easier to answer. Why isn't it being done in every state school? It isn't being done in every state school is because it's expensive and it's intensive in terms of manpower, training, equipment, everything else. Kind of, we are very lucky in the fact that we've put a lot of money and resources into it. So we've got a lot of equipment. We have people that we train up, especially to do the classes, and they can dedicate that time to them. In the state system, there's probably just not the budget for it. You know, my kids are at state school, and their PE class is, their PE teacher is the same teacher that teaches them phonics and maths and everything else. And, you know, on one day a week, they just put a tracksuit on and kind of do a bit of running around, because unfortunately the system's not set up there to support them. In terms of what we'd like to do about that, we're very conscious that we service a certain part of the market, but we do go into a lot of nursery schools as well. We run it there. What we'd like to do is start doing more things in state school and interacting, as you say, with the government, and how we can kind of adjust the government perception of it. You know, kind of government perception of early years education is very much kind of the tenets of, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic. And then there's the social aspect, which is bolted onto early years as well, which is about socialization of your child and, you know, them forming relationships and, you know, learning about authority figures and everything else. What is the afterthought is the physical exercise and developmental exercise. And it really is just an afterthought at the moment. And I think
is that because it's easier to measure those other performance targets, and it's inherently different to sort of measure the well-being of a child, do you think?
I completely agree with that. It's obviously, there's the key outputs that they have by the time they leave nursery, which is, you know, to kind of write their own name or write a sentence, or to be able to do kind of basic arithmetic. And you can definitely measure those, and anyone can do that. What they can't do is, like you say, is measure the kind of health and well-being of a child, and the people there to kind of actually instruct that to the children is slightly harder as well. And, you know, kind of what is definitely becoming more and more prevalent is the fact that we spend so much time and energy on our kind of health and well-being, and either that's kind of personal fitness, kind of, you know, we're now becoming more conscious about mental health and everything else. We spend a lot of time and money concentrating on ourselves, and we just assume that our kids are going to be okay because they're going to go through the same system as everyone else. But they're not. They need more time and energy. They need to work on that. So rather than having developmental exercise as an afterthought, we want to kind of bring it more into the center. And then what you can actually do is you can teach reading, writing, maths, and everything else off exercise. So within our classes, we did a lesson last term about photosynthesis, where the children had to run around, collect different colored balls which represented, you know, earth, water, nutrients, everything else, and then kind of a tree of life grew and everything else. But by the end of it, you had a load of 4-year-olds which could talk about the byproducts of photosynthesis. And you kind of go, well, that is another way of learning, but it's them using their bodies. And actually, because they're physically doing things, it's going to stick in their minds a lot better than it is sitting down and kind of, you know, repeating and writing down things by rote. So kind of, we view education very differently. And like you say, kind of, it's going to be a bit of a struggle for the government education to change, because the system is set up to do it the way it does at the moment. So it's a battle we're going to look to.
Well, I hope people are listening. My daughter's in the other room. She's certainly listening, I think, into what we're talking about. She's ready to get into some photosynthesis with me later.
Yeah.
I certainly hope the government is paying attention to this, Tom. The stats on this, I think, it's almost a national tragedy. 22% of 5-year-olds are either overweight or obese, and each each child who is overweight or obese, that is a tragedy in and of itself. But then you look at the implications nationally, the cost of that as those children grow into adulthood, and start to consume more NHS services than people who are not overweight or obese. There is a cost there, and absolutely someone can sit and measure that cost. And so investment in this area, I think, is really called for. And so, yeah, hopefully people are listening to this message.
Yeah, and kind of, again, it's probably us and our generation that are the problem, because we're the ones that control the kids. Like there isn't an obese child there because they're making themselves the food, or they're going off and buying kind of unhealthy choices and everything else. A lot of it is down to the parents. So we had kind of one parent who delivered us a kind of an overweight child and said, over our summer camp, said, look, we want him to lose weight. I was like, well, of course we will play our part in it, which is giving them a healthy attitude to exercise and realizing that running around isn't him being shouted at by his parents for kind of not running fast enough or not doing enough or anything else. So we can create the environment where they're going to come and run around, make friends, and realize that exercise is important. What we can't control is when they then go home and eat unhealthy options, or overeat, or sit around on screens and do everything else. So we're kind of one part of the solution, but there's a much bigger problem out there, which is kind of the society we live in, and as parents we probably overindulge our children a bit too much.
There's a real effort on collaboration there, isn't there, with the parents, that you have to become a sort of form a good bond with them and get them to co-invest in what you're trying to do. Do you find that difficult with I'm sure you do with some parents more than others? Yeah,
and part of what we're trying to do now is build a community. So it's great that we take the kids off them, and we give them a great time, and we throw the kids back, and I'm sure some parents get no feedback from their children of what they've done. I know when my kids go to school, I ask them what they did, and they tell me what they had for lunch, and I get nothing else from them. So, it's how we can then build the community around it. And that's us all then also giving kind of advice and tips, whether that's on, how to eat properly, the right developmental toys to buy, kind of tips and ideas for what they can do at the weekend and everything else. And without trying to be patronizing and tell parents kind of what they should and shouldn't be doing, we want to kind of help just give them a few extra tools that they can use, that they can go and do it. So as an example, when we went into lockdown last time, a lot of the parents were saying to us, can you do online classes? Can you do everything else? Like, we can't do an online class because you can't have that interaction with the child and make them run around do it. We can all do a Peloton class and follow it to the T and maintain concentration for 45 minutes. You can't ask a kid to look at a screen and try and do exercise and be engaged with everyone else around us. So what we did do is we wrote some articles and we fired out some emails on tips, the stuff that the parents could do with their kids, and ideas on how to keep them entertained and keep them active. And we feel kind of building the community is just kind of one part to kind of helping that kid along.
Tom, I want to pivot slightly, and we had Paul Minter on the podcast about a month ago. Paul's about to set off, I think, in a few weeks' time on an amazing expedition around the UK, running around the coastline of the UK for charity, for military charity. Firstly, I know you knew Paul when he was in the army, and you served together in Afghanistan, and he gave an account of his experiences in Afghanistan, and I know he downplayed a lot of it, and I know that because you were there for that. So perhaps tell us about Paul, and then I know you're involved in a military charity as well, the Not Forgotten charity. So could you tell us about that and what that charity aims to do?
Sure, and kind of one probably leads into the other as well, because Paul kind of I watched his the podcast when he was on with you guys, and I was surprised at how kind of lightly he just kind of glossed over his military career, and kind of I've known Paul for a very long time, and he was in my troop when we were in Afghanistan for the first one in 2006, and I think he'd already done a tour of Iraq by then as well. He is one of the kind of few individuals you kind of look at and go, how are you still here? He's had so many kind of close calls and kind of brushes with destiny or fate or whatever else you want to call it. There's kind of, it's very clear for me to understand why he's on this journey now to go and do this amazing thing and raise awareness, because like I say, he himself has got demons, which he's kind of very, very public and very open about. And he's struggled with how to deal with those. And he's found a way of dealing it. And what he wants to do is he wants to kind of help other people along that journey, which is, incredibly admirable of him. And he's going to raise some awareness about mental health. And he's setting up his own charity, Heads Up, which I think is going to do some great things for the kind of the ex-forces community who are in a similar situation, because I think it is a huge problem which is only just bubbling under the surface at the moment. The fact we spent, kind of 10, 15 years campaigning in Iraq and Afghanistan, and guys like Paul were bouncing between the two countries, back-to-back tours, it's going to take a toll on them. And whether they're kind of papering over the cracks now and living life and kind of concentrating on their family and keeping busy, stuff may kind of start to kind of come out later on. So I think it's, like I say, it's kind of the way he kind of glossed over what he's achieved. He was being very modest because, like I say, he's very lucky to be here. But I don't think he's alone in that situation. How that ties into the Not Forgotten Association. So when I was still in the army, I helped run some events at St. James's Palace and Buckingham Palace. And one of them was for the Not Forgotten Association, which was a charity set up in 1920. So it's currently in our centenary year, which obviously a lot of celebrations were planned and everything else, but a lot like the rest of the charity sector is kind of taken a huge hit this year in terms of fundraising, awareness and everything else. So it's in the centenary year this year. And the event that I went to, sat on the table was a guy from Guards Para, who'd fought in the Second World War, who was a lifeguard as well. Both Bruce and I were lifeguards. So kind of having a chat to him. And then on the other table, there was a Remy guy who'd been injured on a tour that I'd been on in Afghanistan. And it's a charity that encompasses the full spectrum of ages, whereas a lot of kind of charities, you kind of think they concentrate on either the very modern kind of recent conflicts or the very kind of historic ones. This kind of covers the full gamut, and the sole purpose of the Not Forgotten is to kind of bring back that sense of community, camaraderie, fun, being around other ex-military people, so you can then relive your experiences, you can have a laugh, you can have a joke, you can have that kind of dark sense of humor that perhaps other people outside the military don't get. And not dissimilar to Tarka, kind of bringing fun to kids, at that age. The Not Forgotten is there to kind of bring enjoyment and fun back to the ex-military community as well. So I kind of left. I did that event there, and I kind of thought, right, when I leave, I'll get involved in a charity. It took me about 2 years to get my life kind of on track with family, work, and everything else. Approached them and said, "Is there anything I can do, kind of to help the charity?" And they said, kind of like a lot of the other military charities, they're kind of run by the senior generation, people who have been, kind of on, C-suites or anything else, and have got the spare time now to kind of pass on that experience. And they said what we're really missing is kind of engagement with the kind of the younger kind of community who've left the army or Navy or RAF, because it's tri-service as well, 2-3 years ago. And can you try and kind of maybe attract some of them? So I've kind of we initially set up the young ambassadors to bring in kind of people who'd left within the last few years, trying to raise awareness amongst them, because, not that many people have heard of the Not Forgotten, even though it's been around for 100 years, and bring them in to help raise awareness. They can then bring their skills and expertise that they've got from whether they're working in a city or consultancy or anything else, and bring that into the charity, bring a bit of young lifeblood into it, and then hopefully start a succession plan, because when the chairman or the chief of staff, whoever else, move on, we've got people who can fill their places and keep the charity going for another 100 years.
That's great, Tom. I hadn't appreciated you taking that view to the Not Forgotten charity. I think that's something that people will definitely want to follow up on. I think you're doing great work there, and I shall certainly follow up on that. So congratulations with that. And listen, congratulations with Tarka, and thanks so much for a fantastic chat this morning. I think we've got so much to take away from that about how leadership starts, at the very earliest stages of life, and if it's encouraged in the right way, you can set people on a good path. There's definitely a theme here, Reece, of what we talked to Paul Nansen about last week, and
absolutely, yeah.
so much that we can learn from talking to people like you. Before we go, where can people find out more about Tarka, and how can they get in touch?
This is where kind of I hand it over to the much younger people that work in the company. Kind of, we are all about Instagram, so please look up Instagram, which is at tarka.london. We're also, our website is tarkalondon.com. Come on, have a look. There's plenty of photos, plenty of videos, and hopefully we can kind of, pass on some of the fun and enjoyment that kids get in the classes across youth that way. But yeah, have a look.
Tom, very good. Thanks so much. Great to catch up as always, and we will speak to you soon. Thank you for listening, everyone, to Tea and Medals, and we will see you back here next time. Thank you.